One thing I've noticed about football fans is they all talk like the players can actually...
Of all the animals to have been lost to time, none have generated as much awe and attention as the dinosaurs, specifically the non-avian dinosaurs. For over 160 million years, they held dominion over Earth's lands, shaping its natural history, and evolving into a nearly endless amount of different shapes and sizes. And for a while, it seemed like Earth would be forever theirs. However, this possible reality was squashed 66 million years ago, when their party suddenly came to a violent halt.
I don't think that was a big enough.
66
Hold on,
million
let me
years
see.
ago,
Let me see.
when their
It was
and for a
probably a
while,
lot bigger
it seemed
than
like
this.
Earth would be forever theirs. However, this possible
So this is a meteorite,
reality was squashed.
but I don't think that's big enough. I think it was probably like twice the size as that. It was probably a lot bigger than that, guys. Maybe like the size of a stadium.
66 million years ago, when their party
Or maybe even
suddenly
bigger
came
than
to
that,
a
bro.
violent halt. You know the story. A giant asteroid the size of a mountain slammed into the planet with enough destructive force that within a day, Earth had been entirely transformed into an apocalyptic wasteland, making the dinosaurs no more. Or at least, that's what you've been led to think. Because while non-avian dinosaurs are definitely gone, researchers do universally agree that at least some survived the initial D-Day and possibly held on for a surprising amount of time, perhaps hundreds to even thousands of years. And obviously, this is quite a range, and it isn't exactly set in stone either, no pun intended. Therefore, it's impossible to say exactly when the Earth saw its first day without the dinosaurs. However, at the same time, we do have a general idea of what of all species was now unable to fast, with life even returning to the crater site within just a few years. Therefore, in order to see during the final days they traveled, having fared quite well during the collision, largely thanks to their physical design, as well as lower energy requirements and chosen environments, which typically were sheltered. And as a result, they could be found worldwide, and in many cases, were likely apex predators, being represented by the genera such as the Botosaurus, Hyposaurus, Thoracosaurus, Champsosaurus, and Borealisuchus, the latter of which are two crocodilians who literally lived alongside the legends, having both been residents of Hell Creek. These crocodilians together would have held very diverse diets, and they were a bit sizey, sometimes measuring over 3 meters or 10 feet long, which was rather big back then. And Borealisuchus could be even bigger, growing to lengths of 4.5 meters or 15 feet long. Now, most of these crocodilians ended up inhabiting shallow semi-aquatic ecosystems, but a few others ended up choosing land instead, like their coexisting cousins, the Sebecidae, a fully terrestrial group that had also endured through the asteroid, and were now represented by the Zolmasuchus, a Bolivian genus who was a bit small, but still likely had a rather nasty bite. And with the dinosaurs no longer bullying his kind, his descendants, especially the Barinasuchus, would actually become just about the largest terrestrial carnivores since the T-Rex. Talk about a glow-up. And along with the Crocies, another group of reptiles that found themselves doing well, to the misfortune of some of us today, were snakes. And they survived for very similar reasons to their distant relatives.
Yeah, snakes can smell though. They're sensitive.
With the Crocies,
Snake
another group of reptiles
smell
that
is
found
really
themselves
good.
doing well, to the misfortune of some of us today, were snakes. And they survived for very similar reasons to their distant relatives. And honestly, they should have even thanked the asteroid, because while a few groups were wiped out, the lack of competitors going forth led to a massive burst in serpent diversity, and leading to a new status quo that has lasted, with the main change being that boas became quite common, and were relatively big compared to other
snakes are so cool, bro.
and could even, like crocs, sometimes measure over 3 meters or 10 feet long. Groups beat when it came to thriving, and were even a short-time ruler of the earth after dinosaurs, and that was turtles. Now, they're not the most intimidating creatures out there, but turtles are hella tough, and I'm not just talking about their shells, with them having both an adaptable diet and a slow metabolism. In fact, when it came to surviving the space rock, they did just about the best of any group, period. Better than even mammals.
What'd you do? Cheat on your math test again?
Yep.
You know the Wi-Fi works everywhere, right?
With researchers estimating that 80% of Cretaceous turtles made it into the Cenozoic. And just to put that into perspective, can you guess how many mammals made it? A measly 7%. Thus, for a long time, turtles were killing it, being abundant, diverse, and everywhere. The only drawback to this was because turtles are typically the gentle type, well, at least of some animals, their high prevalence also resulted in them becoming a huge prey source, with fossils showing that crocodilians especially love to prey on our shelled friends. So, it seems like Earth immediately after dinosaurs was more reptilian than you would expect from the so-called beginning of the age of mammals. Yet don't get it twisted, because there was much more mammals than before, and they were far bigger, for the very first time reaching sizes larger than a sheep. But for the most part, they remained fun-sized, and were even a bit adorable, with some new faces, including the Polydopomorphia, an extinct order of Metatherians closely related to extant marsupials, who had actually been one of the most successful group of mammals in the Cretaceous, with a particularly prominent family during this time being the Hyopsodontidae. They fell under the Pan-Parasidactyla clade, making them more related to zebras than to rodents, despite their appearance, and generally ranged in size from a small rat to a raccoon, and were likely generalistic eaters that would nip on just about anything that was small enough. But unfortunately, they too are now extinct.
Damn.
Besides them, marsupials were now on the prowl as well, in numbers far larger than before,
These are so adorable.
with the Microbiopteria family especially having been prevalent in the Danian. Yet, as cute as these guys were, they aren't exactly all that interesting, and frankly, none of them really were. But I will say, mammals as a whole were testing the boundaries, expanding and experimenting, and in these are relatively long necks and large robust bodies with stocky limbs. That did allow them to run, but not the bunch would have been the Dissicus, a
The Dissicus.
coyote-sized member who seemed to play the role of a fox or small canid, just on a bigger scale, being actually amongst the larger animals in its homeland, which consisted of North America, Europe, and Asia. And while it was a bit clunky in the running department, it did actually possess additional adaptations for locomotion and to ate meat, and thus it evolved an extremely strong bite. It was all about the variety. Now these were the biggest mammalian carnivores, but they were also joined by the smaller, but equally interesting, Hyaenodonta, which are not to be confused with real hyenas. This was a family of hypercarnivorous placental, yet differed in that they sported slender jaws and slim bodies. And as mentioned, they were smaller too, with Danian hyaenodonts typically being no larger than a medium-sized dog. However, while size was not on their side, they did have the advantage of superior smell, allowing them to become expert trackers, and their teeth were much sharper, designed for shearing over crushing, and ultimately their design would come to haunt the Messanichids, for while they ruled the Danian, the hyaenodonts would eventually strict a memo back then, as other carnivorous groups you might have seen included the Vivariidae, Myosidae, and Similesta, who were also in some cases omnivores and herbivores too. So between these hunters and the smaller herbivores that stalked the lands, you basically have your answer on what replaced the non-avian dinosaurs. But what lies? A pleasant change for one during the Danian. I'm talking about sharks. Lots of them, in fact. Which was typically sea turtle, and 1 million years after the Cretaceous, there was not one, but two species of Otodus meandering around, that already matched the size of large great whites, allowing them to basically eat anything they desired, which
Sharks
was
are so
typically
cool.
sea turtles and fish. And then, on top of these big guys, there is also the chance that a third species was on the scene too, the Obliquus, which if the case, was a very, very bad omen, for this species was even bigger, sometimes hitting 9 meters or 30 feet long.
Fuck,
And
bro.
while the Otodus species were unchallenged when it came to size, they definitely weren't the only sharks taking full advantage of this emptier world, being joined by some genera that have even made it to today, like the Lamna and Nebrius. And besides sharks, there was also many other groups that were popping off, including sea turtles like I mentioned, eels, with them fish, yet are a bit meaner looking, possessing relatively crater, recovered rapidly, and seemingly harbored predators too, given the presence of it in the early Cretaceous. Yet even after the asteroid, it remained a them in the oceans today, Earth's top predators. But what they ate exactly is still a mystery, as unlike sharks, they did not have many sharp continuously replaced teeth, but rather large permanent tooth plates that, at least in some species, seem to be specialized for a mix of jaws. With the age of dinosaurs, is believed to have briefly survived that a handful remained for nearly 500,000 years. And these genera included the Eubacolites, Discoscaphites, Hoploscaphites, and Baculites. And while none were as giant as the older Parapazosia, they were still extremely interesting, and unlike anything
File your taxes 100% free in the app if you didn't file with us last year. Just file with Turbo.
Welcome to our compilation of 7 modern era battles. It's the early morning of February the 28th, 1994, and 6 volunteer pilots are on a bombing mission in violation of a NATO no-fly zone. The leader of the flight is pilot Ranko Vukmirovic from the Bosnian Serb Air Force. He and his men are in Yastreb J-21 jets, which are no match for the NATO F-16s in speed, maneuverability, or weapons. The Yastreb pilots are trying to keep below radar height, but now, with the target getting close, they're forced to ascend to 2,000 meters to start the attack run on a weapons factory. In doing so, the aging Serbian jets light up the watching NATO radars. 50 miles away, 2 patrolling F-16s are informed of the J-21's presence.
Black Flight, you have 6 bogeys. BR-AA 320 for 52 at 7,000. Flanking. Copy that.
The F-16s bank towards the target. In an attempt to shorten the war, NATO has set up a no-fly zone, and the F-16s have been sent on a route to intercept. Vukmirovic gets a visual on his target and arms his bombs. The flight positions themselves in pairs, one after the other, when suddenly a transmission comes through the radio. A pit grows in Vukmirovic's stomach. He can clearly see the trails of the 2 American Air Force jets dead ahead of them. He takes a deep breath. In previous missions, the American jets have only watched and warned the enemy, but not engaged. Vukmirovic knows if the F-16s had wanted to shoot him, they could have done so from miles away. But his eyes go wide as he sees the 2 F-16s approach at breakneck speed and roar through and past the Bosnian Serb flight.
Jesus! Did you see those old Yugos?
Despite the show of force, the Serbian pilots are not distracted and keep their eyes on their objective. The Yastrebs are old tech and still use optical sights. And as the target drifts into the crosshairs, the aging planes release and drop their rudimentary but effective 550-pound bombs on target, striking them from different directions.
They dropped bombs. Understood. You're clear to engage. Weapons free. Roger, moving to engage. This is gonna be shooting fish in a barrel.
At the very rear of the formation, pilot Zlatan Sirnalic watches the last of the bombs strike. The 6 J-21s turn back towards their airbase, but their speed is no match for the F-16s, who sweep in behind them, lining up their sights on the very rear of the formation. The pilot switches to air-to-air mode and selects an AIM-120 missile on his right display computer. On his head-up display, a box designates the target. The F-16 pilot gets a lock and presses the weapon's release button.
Box 3.
The missile flies off from the wingtip. The AIM-120 AMRAAM radar-guided missile fires and locks onto the running J-21's radar signature, rapidly approaching its target. Sirnalic is scanning the skies for the Americans when he sees an enormous flash. He wonders if he's been hit, but then he sees the explosion on his wingman's left wing, immediately shredding half of it off. The 5 remaining J-21s turn over and dive for the ground. One of the F-16s gives chase, following them all the way down into the valleys between the Bosnian hills. Each pair of J-21s goes its own way, leaving Sirnalic completely on his own. He frantically looks over his shoulder as he flies through the terrain, catching the terrifying sight of an American fighter hot on his heels.
Fox 2.
The F-16 fires an AIM-9 Sidewinder heat-seeking missile. It locks on to Sirnalic's hot engines and chases him down across the sky. Sirnalic, flying low, skims over some electrical transmission wires. The missile explodes near the wires and his tail, cutting part of his vertical stabilizer. But he's still flying. He reports the situation, but finds his radio completely dead. Alone and vulnerable, Sirnalic looks over his shoulder, expecting a second impact at any moment. But instead, he sees the F-16 turning away. Back with Mikerevic, he and his wingman push their aircraft to their limits, racing through the valleys. but the F-16 relentlessly closes the distance.
Fox 3.
He releases another AMRAAM missile, which rockets towards its target. Mikhailevich is still looking across the sky to catch a glimpse of an enemy fighter when the missile flies in and disintegrates his wingman. The Yastreb explodes into flame and scrap. He breaks into evasive maneuvers once again as the F-16 fires another missile. It slams straight into his engines. The explosion shreds the fuselage and flames pour out of the holes. He wrestles the dying aircraft, pulling hard on the stick and willing it to ascend as it burns all around him. As flames engulf the cockpit, Mikhailevich pulls the canopy emergency handle and ejects.
Introducing new frosted sodas and floats.
The F-16s leave the scene and catch up to another J-21 flying low over the countryside. It's Cernalic, limping his damaged jet home to safety. He's keeping an eye on his gauges when an F-16 roars past. He's filled with dread and immediately pulls on the stick. His only plan is to gain enough altitude to eject before the American can finish him off. The F-16 gets behind him and he grabs the canopy emergency handle. But then, the F-16 pulls up alongside, matching his speed. He locks eyes with the enemy pilot. The American salutes him and flies away. Out of the 6 Yastreb pilots that volunteered for that dangerous mission, 3 never returned home. Cernalic would later say, "I don't have any bad feelings towards the American pilots." This event is usually referred to as the Banja Luka incident and represents the first NATO combat engagement in its history. Robert Wilbur Wright was credited with 3 victories, the highest score by a USAF pilot in a single mission since the Korean War, while pilot Stephen Yogi Allen was credited with 1 victory.
It's the 27th of March 1999. An F-117 Nighthawk tears through the dark, stormy skies low over the Serbian countryside. The pilot is Lieutenant Colonel Daryl Zalko, and his mission is to bomb the command center of the Serbian Air Force in Belgrade. It's the headquarters of the force that's going to try and stop him on his mission tonight. Zalko's escorted by F-16 Vipers with missiles that can lock on and destroy enemy radar. As he approaches the Serbian border, he hears a command come over the radio.
This is Joint Forces Air Component Commander.
Because of the bad weather, the escorting Vipers are ordered to immediately turn back and return to base. He's on his own. If he's to make it home safely, he has to remain undetected. A ghost. Fortunately, he's in the most advanced operational fighter bomber that has ever flown. The Nighthawk's stealth capabilities make the 65-foot-long bomber appear on radar as if it was the size of a tennis ball, allowing it, so far, to go unchallenged in every mission. That is, every mission until this one. On the ground, an anti-air missile battery is waiting for him. It's under command of Lieutenant Colonel Zoltan Dani. Serbian spies have let him know that the enemy aircraft are coming, and he thinks today is his best chance to take down one of the elusive ghosts. Sweep the skies, Dani orders, and the P-18 early warning radar comes to life. They think at its lowest frequency it may be capable of detecting the enemy planes, but it also detects clouds and rain, resulting in a screen covered in fake signals. But looking closely, Dani sees something. One tiny dot moving through the masses of clouds. A tiny dot headed right towards them. Zalko's Nighthawk speeds towards its objective, the computer preparing the drop. Danny double-checks the low-frequency radar. He can see the target. It's right in front of them. But he needs the SAM radar to get a lock. The men scan the sky just as instructed. Yet, the screens remain dead. But then, Zalko opens his bomb bay, increasing the Nighthawk's radar signature just at the wrong moment.
Imam ga. Fi 2 prati cilj. Fi 1 prati cilj. Lansiraj.
Bitrix 24 is a free CRM system that's 5 times your average CRM.
Zalko breathes. Then, to Zalko's massive relief, the dog turns, jumps up, and leaves. Front-facing radars detect the contact, suddenly tearing apart into a black smudge of as they're rapidly running out of altitude. Rico pulls with all he has, powering through 10 Gs of force. Through the crushing Gs, he sees the beautiful sight of the fulcrum moving into his sights. Rico selects an AIM-9 Sidewinder and starts to pull, aiming ahead of the MiG for the best chance of impact. But the Iraqi pilot sees it, and a desperate last-ditch attempt, he turns upside down and pulls hard towards the ground. Rico's ready.
That's smart. So they're high enough in the ground and he sees what's about to go on, so he fucking turns upside down and then goes down instead of trying to fly up, which would make him have to recalculate.
For the Iraqi to try something, but he's shocked to see the MiG dive straight for the sand. He doesn't even think of following and pulls up to the left, letting the MiG go. The Iraqi pilot starts to pull up and is crushed by extreme G-forces as his plane continues towards the ground. The sand fills his windshield as he pushes the afterburners to maximum. His MiG screaming as it pulls beyond its G limits. He's doing everything to bring the nose up, but it's not enough. And the MiG-29 Fulcrum and its Iraqi pilot crash into the desert sand. Rico's heart races as he comes down from the adrenaline high. He's won. Mole appears 2 miles off his right.
Tactical, right side.
And Rico can finally afford to relax.
Let's go home.
Cesar Rico Rodriguez would tally up 3 victories total in his career, making him tied for the top spot of MiG victories for pilots after Vietnam. We hope both pilots like our film. It's the 6th of April 2003 and 2 A-10 Thunderbolt strike aircraft soar in the skies of Iraq near Baghdad. Flight leader Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Donk T. Strasburger and his wingman Captain Greg Billy Bob Thornton are on a reconnaissance mission in support of coalition forces on the ground. But the Warthogs can't see any of the action. A sandstorm has rolled in underneath them and engulfed the entire region. The 2 aviators circle above in search of breaks in the weather, but then there's an urgent transmission from the ground. It's not good news. Their friend, First Lieutenant John Coke Bloker, tells the pilots that Task Force 269 are pinned down under heavy fire at Mathana Bridge near his position. The 1st Hammurabi Republican Guard Armored Division have T-72s, his rocket pods armed with smoke for the bridge. Donk fixes his reticle directly on the target and pulls the trigger. The terrifying signature groan of the GAU-8 menaces the battlefield, reducing the personnel carrier to scrap. Donk soars just over the enemy as he pulls the nose up and turns west towards Allied lines, followed by columns of anti-aircraft fire.
I have tanks on the circle, Bob.
The Warthog's armor-piercing ammunition punches clean through the tank's weak roof. The T.
This is advance. You're making battalion and company commander really happy.
A much more loyal unit that will not surrender so easily. The 2nd ACR, a task. This, he thinks, must be an Iraqi. Master continues to roll forward as the rest of his troop appears. Doesn't. It punches straight into the side of Broadsword. It's deflected upwards and it bursts out of the deck. It flies on, tumbling as it falls into the sea, without exploding. Cabello is dismayed, but they're not done yet. Coming in behind them is the 2nd flight of 1st Lieutenant Mariano Angel Velasco and Ensign Jorge Nelson Barranuevo.
they are equipped with less powerful but more reliable 250 kilogram bombs.
You have it listen, you type it in, and then you go digging.
Aboard the British ship, they holds the trigger down as long as he can. Then he releases his payload. The bombs fall away, arcing lazily across the air before slamming into HMS Coventry with force. They punch through the hull, the impact echoing through the ship as two almost hollow thunks. But there's no explosion. The second A4 roars overhead without dropping its bombs, the payload failing to release. Seconds drag on. The men start to get back up, looking around with fear and confusion. A voice comes through the intercom reporting damage. But he attempts to use his intercom, but is completely dead. It's no use. He needs to get out. Captain Hartdyke slowly works his way through the smoke and corridors as he listens to the ship groaning and cracking underneath him. He manages, somehow, to find the ship. He's done his duty. And finally, the pilot steels himself. Bloodshed. Even if they know they're flirting with the possibility,